Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at padding versus spacer elements in order to space our user interface accordingly, because you can see it doesn't look too great. I'd say that's because everything is so clamped together, very close together. So we're going to look at the padding modifier and the spacer element. So the elements in our case don't have any spaces between each other. In Jetpack Compose, when you want to add spaces between elements, there are two primary ways. One is padding, or the padding modifier, or introducing a spacer element. So an element that just spaces the thing. So what are the pros and cons of each? Well, the pros of using a padding modifier is the simplicity. So you just add a padding around your element with the padding modifier, and it's straightforward and it's quick. And you can apply it directly to the composable you want to space. So an example, to our buttons, we want to add some padding, we can directly do that. The cons are that there is a limited reusability. So if you want consistent spacing between multiple elements, you need to apply the modifier individually every single time. So each button needs to have this padding, each unit converter, each element would need this padding manually. Okay, then there's the spacer element. So the beauty about the spacer element is the fact that the pro is the reusability. So the spacer element can be used to create consistent spacing between multiple elements without applying the modifier to each one separately. And it's clear intent. So using a spacer explicitly communicates your design intention, making your layout more self-explanatory. The cons, however, are it's slightly more complex. It involves adding an additional composable to your layout, which may slightly increase code verbosity. So yeah, which one to choose? Well, the choice between using the padding modifier and the spacer element depends on your specific use case and design preferences. If you need fine-grained control or only want spacing around a particular element, the padding modifier is convenient. If you want consistent spacing between multiple elements, the spacer element offers a cleaner, more reusable solution. So that being said, let's take the spacer option. We will add one underneath our text here. So we have our column unit converter, then we have the text, and before the outlined text field, that's where I'm going to use the spacer. Okay, so there's this composable that's called the spacer, and you need to pass a modifier. So we can just use the default modifier here, that is over here, the modifier dot, and then we can just say what height we want to have. So I want, for example, 16 dp, so 16.dp. And in order to use it, we need to import the extension property called int dp. Okay, so a density pixel is just a pixel that depends on the density of pixels of your screen. What that's basically generates is the fact that you have different sizes of screens, right? And also different amounts of pixel on each screen. So some have a DPI of 440, others have a DPI of 300, others have even less DPI. So older devices, for example, usually are not that pixel dense, and that means that the same amount of pixels span over a bigger distance. So that means that UI items wouldn't be as aligned if you would just use pixels, but if you use density pixels, then suddenly items can be aligned. Okay, because they basically say, okay, you have this much space on your screen and take away or use this much space. So it's like 16 pixels, but really on the screen, if you have a very high density pixel screen, so a lot of pixels, which means let's say 1,000 pixels in the wide area, then that would be more like 30 or 40 or 50 pixels. Okay, so it's not a fixed pixel value, but it is a relative pixel value. Damn, was that hard for me to explain. I need to find a better way to do that. So there we have spacer number one, and you can see that there is a little bit of space now between the unit converter and our text. So if I comment this out, you see there is no space in between. So this spacer basically now has created this little bit of distance between one element and the other. So between the text and the outline text field. That's exactly what I wanted to achieve. Now we can use this spacer and put it underneath our outlined text field. And suddenly you can see we also have a distance between the outlined text field and our buttons. It's a little difficult to see here, but let's run our application to see what this is gonna look like. So we run our app here and we see that there is now a little distance that we didn't have before. And that's what our spacers allow us to do. Now we need one more spacer, and I would say that goes before the result. So here at the bottom, before we get the result, underneath those buttons. So that's a very easy way to just get the space in between. I really like that. Otherwise, you could obviously also modify here, for example, the padding. So you could have a modifier equals modifier dot padding, and then you can add padding towards all directions. So let's say 60 or 100, let's do 100 density pixels. So it's a whole lot. You can see now we have 100 density pixels distance here because we created a padding around our text. Okay, so that would just be another way to add distance, but we are using the spacer in this case. All right, that's it for this video. In the next one, we're going to look at our drop-down menu a little more.